She-Hulk Attorney at Law is the latest show to grace the screens of the MCU, created for Disney Plus by Jessica Gao and directed primarily by Coiro. The show centres around a lawyer who gains Hulkitis. She comes down with a bad case of Hulkitis. She's also a woman. And based on the audience reaction, they really should have asked permission before they did that. Something that I need to make very clear right off the bat is that it is absolutely fine to not enjoy this show. It is perfectly legal and ethical to think this is a bad programme. There are plenty of great reasons to not enjoy this show. You might not enjoy the premise, or the actors, or the humour, or superhero fatigue, or it's too simple or too complicated, or you don't like the CGI, or it's just bad. Just a bad, unenjoyable piece of shit. Those are all great reasons. And there are a million more. I'm going to make no attempt to convert you to enjoying any Disney product. Life is too short to be watching things you don't enjoy. And no, that's not an invitation to close the video. Yesterday, I did some research, an experience which I feel is best summarised by this clip.
That women are constantly being catcalled, which is objectively, verifiably false. Now, I don't dispute that some random drunk guy might do it every once in a blue moon, but the reality is that catcalling is extraordinarily rare, and pretending that it's a constant thing for any woman merely walking down the street.
Needless to say, I didn't enjoy this experience. I'm not going to be including any other clips other than that funny one, because my issue is with the culture, not with individual creators. Phase 4 of the MCU has had a heavy emphasis on their female characters, and for some people, they don't like this for some reason. In a world designed for and by men, the very act of being a woman is an aberration. In a world designed for and by men, the very concept of womanhood is defined in relation to manhood. Put more simply, if we show the world a male character, they go, okay. If you show them a female character, they go, what possible reason could they have for doing this? Showing a man is neutral. Showing a woman is a choice that you made. And people can question that. People would never question this neutral choice, though. This normalization of males being dominant in cinema is best illustrated by looking at the first 3 phases of the MCU. It took 20 films for a woman to even be mentioned in the title of a film. That was Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was 2019. That same year we had the first film that was fronted entirely by a woman. That was Captain Marvel. 1.5 films in the first 3 phases, the first 10 years of the MCU. 1.5 films. We never really heard people complain about an MHEU beforehand. I think this says more about people's cultural perception of men than it does about their cultural perception of whatever it is the MCU are doing. Look, I know it's a fool's errand to try and understand what motivates misogyny. I am a fool. If you could just hold my clown shoes for a minute. Thank you. What is the downside to giving more rights to people? In many of these situations, it doesn't affect their lives at all. Why do people oppose these things so fiercely? And it might be the optimist in me talking, but I don't think that people try to prevent others from living more happy lives because they are merely hateful. I think it's because they think that if they give power to other people, it must come at the expense of their own power. Allow me to explain in needless depth. Mercantilism was a theory of economics. No, don't click off the video, stay with me, okay? I'm going somewhere. Mercantilism was a theory of economics that had 2 main components. There is a finite amount of wealth, and in order to grow wealth, it has to be taken from others. Nations went about achieving this by making favourable trade deals, maximising their exports whilst minimising imports, slavery, stealing wealth from their colonies. If we apply that theory to our situation, we get something that I have dubbed social mercantilism. Social mercantilism is the belief that there is a finite amount of social and societal power, and in order to grow your power, it must be taken from others. Despite how common sense the theory feels, it transpires that mercantilism didn't describe the reality of the situation. I mean, there's a reason why it only comes up when speaking historically. Trade doesn't have to be aggressive. In fact, we've found that good trade deals benefit everyone involved, and often benefit a lot of people who aren't involved as well. The rising tide raises all ships. Similar to its economic namesake, social mercantilism suffers the same fate. Despite how common sense it feels to suggest that giving power to one group means taking it away from others, empowering marginalised groups benefits everyone. An uncomfortably short amount of time ago, women weren't allowed to do anything. But as it transpires, when you let the other half of the population apply their talents, you get a lot more done, making everybody's lives much, much better. The only people who suffer are people who need an unethical power imbalance. I speak for myself here, but I don't think we really need to worry about their feelings. Do you? Another point that I saw made over and over again was the assertion that Jennifer Walters is a bad, unheroic, unlikable, irredeemable character. The scenes that I saw most frequently referenced when making this point were the scenes in which she's mean to Bruce, and the scenes in which she yells at the men who are harassing her. So let's talk about her conversations with Bruce. I'd like to say up top that the overwhelming feeling that I got from these scenes is that Bruce and Jennifer have a very close familial relationship. They're cousins, but I think their relationship is best described as a sibling-like relationship. So I'm aware that they're cousins, but I'm calling it a sibling relationship to emphasise the closeness. Sibling relationships often retain a larger degree of childishness to them. The reason why I think this is because when you've grown up with someone for that long, there is an intrinsic level of trust. You feel very safe with your siblings. So when Jennifer says some really mean things to Bruce and then doesn't adequately apologise for this, it's easy to assume on a surface level that she's a bad person for this. What felt clear to me, however, is that Bruce understood that she was undercutting a moment of sincerity with a loving jab. And to me, this is really clear in Bruce's reaction. He doesn't go, Jennifer, that you haven't apologised. He basically goes, get in the car, you little runt, what you like. Similarly, when they're having their big fight, they're not calm by any means, but there's a childish competitive undercurrent to it, which emphasises that they're not fighting to hurt each other. You'll see some kids playing a board game, one of them will do a move the other one doesn't like, and then they'll start wrestling each other. They're not fighting to hurt each other, they're fighting because that's what siblings do. It's just more fantastical due to the fact that they have superpowers, they can do more amazing things. Other times that we see Bruce behave in this way is he pushes her off the cliff, and instead of her going, "You've just pushed me off a cliff," she just gives him the finger, because they understand that playful nature. Additionally, when Jennifer picks up that rock and throws it further than he did initially, he throws one into space, and then he just goes, "Just showing you how it's done, just showing you how it's done," because that's their relationship. The way in which this is most clearly shown is the moment that there is consequence to their actions. The second that they break Bruce's bar, the fight instantly stops, and Jennifer helps reassemble it. She may as well have gone, "Please don't cry, don't tell Mum, please don't tell Mum." It is possible for people to have complex, unconventional relationships that are still healthy. Another point that people were making, which I just can't get my head around, was saying that she was unheroic because she turned into the Hulk when the men were harassing her. It was literally the second time she ever turned into the Hulk. Immediately after transforming for the second time, she gets tackled by Bruce. She then wakes up with very hazy memories of what's taken place. She then transforms for a third time and is able to control herself. And then she describes overtly in the text that she was way too overwhelmed with this new thing to control herself. But now she can. To conclude from this scene that she is a bad person or unheroic is not only ignorant of what she tells us, but is so unbelievably unfair when we compare it to the way that Bruce behaves when he's the Hulk. Bruce had a very different timeline when it comes to learning to control the Hulk. Are we holding him accountable for every building that he knocks down? Of course we aren't. What I feel like is taking place when people criticise Jennifer for hulking out in this context, where she's being pursued by 3 men she doesn't know who are much bigger than her and are still following her after she's asked them not to, is that the people making these criticisms feel attacked. They see an embodiment of toxic masculinity, people who are creating a hostile environment for women, and they see themselves. For me, that says a lot more about the people who are making those criticisms than it says about the thing they're criticising. And if you are arguing that you wouldn't become stressed and become the Hulk in that situation, I don't understand you as a person. The point that I'll make to summarise this section is that it's episode 1. Characters have to start from a place from which they can grow. It may be that throughout the course of the series that Jennifer learns to be kinder to people, and that will be her arc for the series. But I can think of another character who had a very similar arc. He's a much less known character than Jennifer Walters. You may know him as a
genius, billionaire, playboy.
Full-on rapist, you know?
In the first outing of one Tony Stark, he was a war profiteer. He was making weapons of mass destruction. But that's not as bad as being rude and yelling at some men. The last point I want to make is very simple, but it is a concept that a lot of people have no understanding of. Not everything is made for you. One of the reasons why white men find it so difficult to comprehend this is because everything is made for white men. The entire world panders to them, begging for their attention in particular. I mean, in a sense, I feel bad for them. I mean, what else were they supposed to think? Just think of the oceans of adult men who despise Justin Bieber, One Direction, Twilight, Taylor Swift. The list is unending. If something is popular and aimed at young women, you bet your bottom that older men are going to be lining up to drag it down. I mean, as if it has anything to do with them. I mean, God forbid young women enjoy something. And as we all know, the things that boys enjoy are always the pinnacle of art and are never stupid. Once upon a time, my friends and I were discussing Avengers Endgame whilst walking home from the midnight premiere. And we all agreed that that bit where all the women had the girl power moment probably could have been done better. None of us thought that it was bad that it was there, just that it was a bit awkward. But then something occurred to me, something that occurs to me every so often. It wasn't made for me. It was made for little girls. Yes, they could have done something more subtle or sophisticated, but in terms of raw communication, that is a very powerful image. That much is undeniable. For the first time ever, a generation of young girls would be walking out of cinemas from a mainstream film with that lineup seared into their brain. Yeah, I like good cinema, but I like the idea of a more confident generation of women a lot more. So okay, you don't like She-Hulk, you don't enjoy Twilight, you don't enjoy Taylor Swift. It isn't the end of the world that people enjoy something that isn't to your taste. But for now, I'd like to just put a little bow on what we've been talking about today. It is my personal belief, because of the criticisms that I've read over the past few days, that people don't like this show in particular because it directly addresses issues of toxic masculinity. And then, of course, there's this clip of me. In this clip, what he's saying is that catcalling doesn't exist. That's amazing. This is erasure of the lived experience of millions of people. And if he's making that kind of statement about that, it's very clear to see in what way his thoughts are influenced. So that isn't all I have to say, but it's all I can include in this week's video. I'd like to thank you for watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it and comment something if you have some feedback that you want to give me. I'd really appreciate that. And for now, me and Baxter are going to say bye-bye. Goodbye.